Hello guys, we are on the 7th game of the Dominating Open File series, and this game is played between Nimzowitsch and Tarrasch in 1925. And let's see the game: knight f3, knight f6, c4, c5, knight c3, d5, cd5, and knight takes d5 and d4. And here knight takes c3 is not very good. After d takes c3 and d4 and here okay, fifth move d4. Here if at all e4 is played, then knight takes c3 is not very good. After d takes c3, queen takes d1 check, and king takes d1. White has a stable advantage due to the advanced black c pawn. The b5 and c4 squares will be perfect spots for the white's pieces, the knight and bishop and even the king in the endgame. Here so that knight takes c3 is not good. Knight b4 and bishop to c4 is another very interesting line. Okay, but that game didn't go this way. After d4 and after c takes d4, c takes d4. Here if at all knight takes c3, b takes c3, then c takes d4 and c takes d4, e6 and e4, bishop b4 check and bishop d2. This is like the Grunfeld, and also gives a stable advantage to white. So knight takes c3 is not good. So after c takes d4, queen takes d4, e6, e3, and here e4 is normal and more aggressive, because after e4 then knight takes c3, queen takes c3, and bishop d7, bishop d b takes c3, queen takes c3, queen takes c3, and so knight c6, then bishop b5, then bishop d7 and castles. This looks better for white. And here instead of e4, if knight takes d5, then e takes d5, then e4, d takes e4, queen takes d8, king takes d8, knight g5, and bishop b4, bishop b4 check, and bishop d2, bishop takes and king takes, king e7. This gives some initiative to black. So here e3 is chosen, And after knight c6, bishop b5. And after missing the principal continuation of e4 on 7th move, white is forced to primitively finish development without real chances to get an advantage. And bishop d7, bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, knight e5, knight takes c3, knight takes c6, queen takes d4, knight takes d4, knight d5, and bishop d2. In a symmetrical pawn structure like this, it is very important to support the pieces' harmony and to go for active play. Black's next move requires precise follow-up play. Bishop to c5. Another option was here to play bishop e7. Then after e4, knight b6. Then rook c1. Castles. Then king e2. Then bishop f6 with solid play for black. So after bishop c5, knight b3, bishop b4. This is imprecise and allows white to get a small initiative after his next move. Here bishop b6 neutralizing the white knight was better. And after e4, knight to e7 and bishop to c3 and knight c6 is equal. All minor pieces restrict each other. A very interesting setup. After bishop b4, rook c1, rook d8. Here if at all black would have taken the bishop with bishop takes d2 check, then king takes d2, then rook d8 and king e. After king takes d2 and black plays rook d8, then king e2 is slightly better for white because the c file is slightly more dangerous than the d file. Now bishop takes b4, knight takes b4, king e2. Suddenly black is in uncomfortable situation. White threatens to penetrate on the 7th rank. Meanwhile, black obtains nothing on the d file. Black must play very precisely. Now king e7. Here knight takes a2 is evidently a mistake. After rook c7, another rook intends to capture the a7 pawn. White is clearly better. So rook c4. From here the viewers can enjoy Nimzovich's patient and brilliant realization of a small advantage. Now knight a6. If at all knight c6 is played, then rook h c1 with the idea to play knight c5 comes. Now rook h c1, the c7 square is now covered, but the black knight will be out of play for a long time. Rook d7 and then rook d7. Black is also ready to double. However, in this position the c file is much more promising than the d file. This is because the white king is controlling the infiltration square and the white knight is more stable and can even close the d file. The a6 knight is very passive and it is only a matter of time before it is attacked by the b pawn. f4. This is imprecise. This move secures the knight's future on d4. Oh sorry, I mean this is not impressive play. This is a very good move. This is an impressive play and this move secures the knight's future on d4. Also the white king gets a perfect safe and active position on f3. Another possible plan can be to expand on the king side. Rook h d8, knight d4, f6. Black wants to attack the white knight and penetrate on the second rank. if possible. Of course, white can prevent it by moving the knight to f3 immediately or after being attacked. Before any action in the center or king side, white wants to lock out the black knight using his queen side pawns. The next move patiently works to that effect. And after a4, it looks impossible for black to stop the b5 advance, having great impact. Nimzowitsch avoided the move b4, after which b5 may lead to some complications, although they must be in white's favor. There is no reason to complicate matters in positions where you dominate and the opponent lacks any real counterplay. It is always good advice to play patiently and only take action after eliminating possibilities of counterplay. e5, fe5, fe5, then knight f3, then king e6. It looks like black has consolidated. This is only an illusion. His rooks are toothless on the d file. His king may meet danger even in the center. The main problem is the knight, which has been misplaced for a long time now. Conversely, the white knight is perfect. It controls the d2 square, attacks the isolated pawn on e5, and is ready to jump to g5 at any moment. And now b4, b6, then rook 1 c2. This is a useful prophylactic move. Then h6, then h4. Before any direct action, white wants to collect as many advantages as possible. The last move fixes black's pawn structure on the king side, thus more pawns will be available to attack there. Also moving the pawns to h5 and g4, and maybe even use f5 for the knight may be a useful plan. Rook d6, h5, rook d5, rook g4, and here we are. White's rook uses the g file with great impact. It is formally closed, but placing the rook in front of g2 pawn, it is possible to benefit from the weak g6 square and exposed g7 pawn. Strange but true, the closed g file brings more to white than the open d file controlled by double rooks. Black's position suddenly collapses. White's rooks will simultaneously disturb the black king and pawns using both c and g file. Now rook 5 d7, rook c6 check. Here rook g6 check is more precise. Now rook d6. Here if at all king f5 is played, then rook c g6 with a mate coming soon, and if at all king d5 was correct, here, and white should repeat with rook to c1, and after king to e6, and now rook g6 check wins again. But black goes rook d6 and rook g6 check, king e7, and if at all king d5 is played, then rook c takes d6 check, rook takes d6, then e4 check, king c6, b5 is coming. Okay, so king went to e7. Now rook takes g7 check, king f8, rook takes d6 check, rook takes d6, rook takes a7, knight takes b4, knight takes e5. The situation has stabilized. White has a completely winning position, not only because of the two extra pawns, but the white pieces also still dominate. White's realization is impressive here. And rook e6, knight g6 check, and king g8, knight e7 check, king f8, knight f5, knight d5, g4. White has consolidated the king side position with a wonderful knight maneuver. Now it protects the e3 pawn and attacks the weak pawn on h6. The game is over. After knight f4 check, king f3, knight d3, rook a8 check, king f7, rook h8, knight c5, rook h7 check, king g8, rook takes h6, rook takes h6, knight takes h6 check, king f8, knight f5, knight takes a4, and here white pawns are much faster. The rest of the game is just a matter of technique, and here black resigned. The game was won in fine fashion and illustrates relativity in chess. Not all open files are equal. And here Nimzowitsch convincingly won his eternal opponent Dr. Saibat Tarrasch. Okay guys, I hope you would have enjoyed the game. I will be meeting you in the next game. Thank you all.